This presentation that you're about to see is the first of a major series containing some of my greatest discoveries within the realm of the esoteric, specifically upon the topic of world-age cycles. Now I'm going to be talking about these secret conjunction patterns which are responsible for actively triggering global upheaval, which are encoded in various religious or even mythological texts. Now this work follows on from my own book, Occult Physics, this title here. And this deals with the ideal celestial cycles of the planets, and also the careful placement of various ancient megalithic structures upon the Earth, including covert military intelligence bases. Now if you do wish to support my work, I would urge you to visit my website and purchase a copy of my book. They are all signed, and you can only get them from my website. They're not on Amazon or anywhere else. You can also help me by donating money via various cryptocurrencies. In this current presentation, then, we're going to consider the great global disasters that have afflicted the Earth going back to the end of the last ice age. First, we're going to look at the scientific evidence for the disasters themselves, and then I'm going to reveal the precise conjunction pattern that is responsible for actively triggering these disasters. Now, this is just an introduction. In future videos, I will go on in more depth to look at how this pattern is encoded in various different mythological books and also religious books, and herein I'm thinking of Ovid's Metamorphoses, which contains the stories of the Greek gods, and also the Bible, specifically the Gospels of Jesus. For now though, let's begin with the presentation. So we're going to begin then by looking at some of the scientific evidence for past global disasters. In this instance, we are going to concentrate upon the period between the present time and the end of the last ice age. Firstly, we have what is known then as the Younger Dryas period. This was a climatic event between 12,900 and 11,700 years before present. It was an event that saw a sharp decline in temperature for most of the northern hemisphere, and this occurred quite suddenly, resulting in a decline of some 2 to 6 degrees in just a few decades. What of the event itself though? 12,900 years before present, or 10,900 BC. What actually caused this? According to modern science, the best evidence we have at the moment suggests that it was caused by a cometary impact, and this is evidence from deep troughs located in Lake Superior. Moreover, the impact theory explains the megafauna extinction, nanodiamonds, platinum, and iridium. More than this though, it also had an effect upon numerous life forms. According to the article here, as a result of the cometary impact, the big animals, including mastodons, camels, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats, all vanished. Their human hunters, known to archaeologists as the Clovis people, set aside their heavy-duty spears and turned to a hunter-gatherer subsistence diet of roots, berries, and smaller game. The sudden drop in temperature affected human life itself, causing all kinds of changes in the way we survived. Now further to this, we can then go over from North America to Europe, and note something else that occurred in exactly the same time period, the eruption of the supervolcano Lacher C. And here one can see from the diagram the effects of its eruption as determined by modern-day scientists. This would appear to be a secondary effect as a result of the primary cometary impact. Further evidence for global disaster circa 10,900 BC is also to be had from a recently excavated ancient site located in present-day Turkey, known as Gobekli Tepe. And here you can see an actual scientific paper concerning some of the findings. According to the abstract, the researchers have interpreted much of the symbolism of Gobekli Tepe in terms of astronomical events. By matching low-relief carvings on some of the pillars at Gobekli Tepe to star asterisms, we find compelling evidence that the famous vulture stone is a date stamp for 10,950 BC, plus or minus 250 years, which corresponds closely to the proposed Younger Dryas event, estimated at 10,890 BC. We also found evidence that the key function of Gobekli Tepe was to observe meteor showers and record cometary encounters. Indeed, the people of Gobekli Tepe appear to have had a special interest in the Taurid meteor stream, the same meteor stream that is proposed as responsible for the Younger Dryas event. Is Gobekli Tepe the smoking gun for the Younger Dryas cometary encounter, and hence for coherent catastrophism? What one can see here then is a civilization, or at least the monuments of a civilization, which seem to correspond to the scientific evidence that we have for past global disaster at the exact same time period. Now in proceeding we then get to the end of the Younger Dryas, and this is where we have a sudden reversal in temperature towards the upside, this occurring after a period of about 1150 to 1300 years from the start of the event, during which the temperatures were much lower. Here we have some ice core data and also some tree ring data, which speaks to how suddenly the temperature increase took place, marking the end of the Younger Dryas period. Some of the data suggests an increase in temperature over 40 to 50 years in 3 discrete steps, each lasting 5 years. But other data such as dust concentration and snow accumulation suggest an even more rapid transition, involving as much as 7 degrees of warming in just a few years. You can see here then from the table that we have 5 different dates, most of them being derived from ice core samples, with one based upon tree ring data or dendrochronology. If you average them all out, you get a date for the end of the Younger Dryas period at 9612 BC. If we move further forwards in time, we can then look at another global disaster which appears to have occurred, this one from the mid-8th millennium BC. And here I'm going to cite Uriel's Machine, a book by Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas. Now they themselves are also rather interested in past global disasters and cycles of destruction, much like myself, and they too have examined some of the scientific evidence surrounding this topic. One particular disaster, as noted in their book, has been dated to 7640 BC. This would appear to have been a bombardment of the Earth by multiple cometary fragments, and is based upon evidence from tektites. Here you can see the citation from the book itself. In 1970, tektites were found embedded in fossilised wood in Australia, which was carbon dated and found to have an age of 9520 plus or minus 200 years before present. Now a specific team of researchers, the Tolmans, refined the data to come up with a very specific date of 7640 BC. Now tektites themselves are small, smooth, glassy green rocks, which scientists have determined as solid evidence of a cometary impact, a signature so to speak. Still further in time, approximately 1000 years, we then have a 7th millennium BC event. Here at the midpoint of the millennium, there are 3 particular things to note. The first one, in 6500 BC, is the formation of the English Channel. This is also when scientists believe the wheel was invented, with the Neolithic period beginning in China. Next, there is the eruption of the Kuril volcano on Russia's Chamchatka Peninsula, a particularly powerful explosion registering a 7 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index. Classed as a supercolossal event, explosions of this type usually only occur once every 500 to 1000 years. The date estimated for this is 6440 BC, plus or minus 25 years. Further to this, approximately 6400 BC, Lake Agassiz drained into the oceans for the final time, leaving lakes Manitoba, Winnipeg, Winnipegosis, and the Lake of the Woods, among others in the region, as its remnants. Once again then we have massive geophysical activity registered all around the world at the exact same time, circa 6500 BC. Moving forward still further in time, we then have the so-called 5.9 kiloyear event, as occurred circa 3900 BC. This was one of the most intense aridification events during the entire Holocene period. Associated with the last round of the Sahara pump theory, it probably initiated the most recent desiccation of the Sahara, as well as a 5-century period of colder climate in more northerly latitudes. It triggered human migration to the Nile, which eventually led to the emergence of the first complex, highly organized state-level societies in the 4th millennium BC. Now looking into this event further, it is well worth noting that all earlier arid events were followed by recovery, as is attested by the wealth of evidence of humid conditions in the Sahara between 10,000 and 6,000 years before present. However, it appears that the 3900 BC event was followed by a partial recovery at best, with accelerated desiccation in the millennium that followed. Going forward several centuries from this event, we then have another event of great significance, what would appear to be a comet striking the Earth around 3150 BC, On screen one can see two paragraphs taken from the book Uriel's Machine, detailing this. In the top paragraph, the authors restate the fact that the Earth was struck by cometary fragments in 7640 BC, an event not only backed up by tektite evidence, but also evidence of a disturbance to the Earth's magnetic field. In this regard then, Knight and Lomas found similar evidence of a magnetic field disturbance in 3150 BC, once again indicating some sort of cometary impact. In this case they further note though the research of one Professor Laritsis of the University of Rhodes. He had developed his own case for a cometary impact using a variety of evidence, separate from the evidence uncovered by Knight and Lomas, which also led to the same conclusion, that the Earth was indeed struck by a comet circa 3150 BC. It is at this point that we take quite a leap forwards into the future, to the 6th century AD, and here we have another disaster event, one which would appear to be a strong contender for triggering the Dark Ages, which immediately followed. Here is an article from the Thunderbolts project titled The Justinian Plague of 562 AD, an electromagnetic drama. It begins with a quote from a book written in 1749 by Thomas Short. From 562 AD, a plague raged for 52 years, the like of which has never been seen before or since. The article goes on to note that death was usually within 3 days from multiple causes, buboes and high fever, carbuncles and suicidal madness, but quick and immediate death. The manner of infection was also indiscriminate, from touching to mere association. The mortality rate was horrific when compared to modern experiences of plague or any other pathology. Short says that in ancient Constantinople alone, 10,000 people died a day when the plague struck. Now ordinarily a plague would just be something that would sweep throughout the lands causing death. However, it would appear that this particular plague was associated with some rather unusual celestial phenomena. Herein the article continues. Placing this dreadful scourge aside and examining parallel events, we find some remarkable coincidences. During this plague period between 519 AD to 605 AD, no less than 9 highly visible comets were seen. Weird blood-coloured flashing skies and strangely multiple suns often accompanied this scenario, also associated with 10 incredibly destructive earthquake storms, e.g. Antioch, 200,000 dead, and 7 worldwide mega-famines. Accompanying this were totally chaotic and unseasonable weather, with cataclysmic inundations by water, wind, and tempest. Sticking with this year of 562 AD, one may consult another source, which would appear to strongly back up the account given by Thomas Short in the 18th century. This is the Brut de Silo, the most ancient surviving written history of the British Isles, which is recognised by the Oxford University as being one of the most important surviving artefacts of antiquity, thereby giving academic weight to the often chided claim by prolific amateur historians that an enormous comet lit up the sky from Ireland to Gaul, taking the shape of a fire-breathing dragon, which struck Britain with tremendous force and heat in November 562 AD, devastating both the population and the landscape. From the quote given, one can see reference to a star of enormous size being sighted in the heavens, having a single shaft, and at the head of the shaft a ball of fire in the shape of a dragon. Multiple beams were seen to emanate from it. Incredible as it may seem to many historians, archaeological evidence of the vitrification of several ancient hill forts and stone structures of these islands gives compelling authority to the contention that Britain and Ireland were devastated by this comet, which entered the Earth's atmosphere and wiped out the majority of the population that was purportedly in excess of 10 million, while many of the estimated 2 million who survived were forced to seek refuge in Brittany and other parts of what was known as the Cambrian or ancient Cometary Empire. Moving on to the late Middle Ages, we then have a very notable event in history, one that is recorded in many historical textbooks, the Black Death, also known as the Great Plague, which swept the globe throughout the mid-14th century AD. Being one of the most devastating pandemics in human history, it resulted in the deaths of an estimated 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia from 1347 to 1351. The Black Death is estimated to have killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population. In total, the plague may have reduced the world population from an estimated 450 million to some 350 to 375 million in the 14th century, with it taking some 200 years for it to recover to its previous level. Now, as with the plague of the 6th century, once again we can note that coinciding with the Black Death in the late Middle Ages, certain unusual celestial phenomena were present within the heavens. In this regard, one may cite the book The Cosmic Winter by Victor Clube and Bill Napier. As noted within their book, at least one chronicler at the time reports of the most immediate cause of the plague, that in 1345, between Cathay and Persia there rained a vast rain of fire, falling in flakes like snow and burning up mountains and plains and other lands, with men and women, and then arose vast masses of smoke, and whosoever beheld this died within the space of half a day. In their book the authors go on to note that in England and Scotland there is a pattern of abandoned villages and farms, soaring wheat prices, and falling populations. In Eastern Europe there was a series of winters of unparalleled severity and depth of snow. The chronicles of monasteries in Poland and Russia tell of cannibalism, common graves overfilled with corpses, and migrations to the west. Even before the Black Death came then, a human catastrophe of great proportions was underway in late medieval times. Indeed, the cold snap lasted well beyond the period of the plague. A number of such fluctuations are to be found in the historical record, and there is good evidence that these climatic stresses are connected not only with famine, but also with times of great social unrest, war, revolution, and mass migrations. In summary then, we can see here in the following table each of the previously noted extreme geophysical events, each one that I have just laid out, in order. Firstly, we have the Cometary bombardment event, dated here to 10,950 BC per the article concerning the ancient site of Gobekli Tepe, from the analysis of its vulture stone. This would appear to be the starting point of the Younger Dryas period. The end point, thus coinciding with the date of 9612 BC, with the sudden rise in global temperature. The date here is the average of the 5 samples as noted in the table shown previously. Next, there is the date for the cometary bombardment of 7640 BC, which is cited from Uriel's machine, per the work of the Tolmans. For the mid-7th millennium BC, the flooding, seismic and volcanic events, we then have the date for the specific eruption of the Russian volcano, as would appear to be the best fix for the overall disaster, at 6440 BC. Next, there is the sudden aridification event of 3900 BC, the date for this being taken from the Wikipedia article, as was cited. Following on from this, there is then the date for the comet strike of 3150 BC. This is per the work of Knight and Lomas, as given in their book Uriel's Machine, which includes also the work of Professor Laritzis, also cited in the same publication. We then have the date for the strange comet sighted in the sky in 562 AD. This is per the citation from the article from the Thunderbolts project, and also with regard to the Brut Ticillo. Finally, there is the Black Death event of the late Middle Ages. In this case, the eyewitness cited by Clube and Napier in their book The Cosmic Winter gives the precise date of 1345 AD for the unusual celestial phenomena accompanying the event, the fire in the sky as cited. Now, in consideration of all of these events, one can see a wide variety of effects. Some of them involve cometary bombardment of the Earth, others would appear to be more strictly earthbound, so to speak, flooding, extreme volcanic activity, or sudden changes in global temperature. One could therefore be forgiven for thinking that all of these events are completely separate and independent from one another, but this is not true. There is one common denominator associated with each of them, a critical event that links them all. A very distinct conjunction pattern in the heavens, a rare pattern that has a certain very special irregular cycle. It is a pattern that is recorded in many ancient esoteric texts, be they religious or classed as mythological. It is essentially the master mystery pattern causing disaster to the earth. To give a Lord of the Rings analogy, just as there is one ring to rule them all, there is one conjunction pattern that ranks higher than all others, being responsible for triggering earthbound disaster. It is essentially the core pattern behind many of the Earth's greatest disasters. On screen here one can see a diagrammatic representation of the pattern in question, which I refer to as the world age-ending celestial configuration. All of the sudden disasters or extreme climate events as previously detailed would appear to coincide very closely with this conjunction pattern, as manifest in the heavens. An alignment of Mars, Venus, the Sun, and Mercury with the galactic centre of the Milky Way, whilst simultaneously the Sun and the Earth are aligned close to the Pleiades star group. You can see then, from the configuration, that we have two separate alignments offset from one another by some 25 degrees. Now if we analyse in detail the specific configuration, we find that it has a very distinct irregular cycle. Here then we may note that one complete cycle is to be had every 4,497 years. That is to say, that every 4,497 years we will always get a repeat of this pattern. That being said, within this time period there are four distinct sub-cycles. In this instance, the first subinterval is 1183 years. This is the length of time that has to pass before the next instance of the configuration. After this, the alignment pattern next occurs after 1343 years. Following this, the pattern then manifests once more after 1183 years, and finally, it next occurs after 788 years. Adding up all of these four subintervals of time, one has a complete cycle of 4,497 years. Of course, one must note that these are not standard tropical years, but rather sidereal years. This is due to the fact that the alignment of the planets coincide with the background star field, and thus precession must be taken into account, which of course necessitates the use of sidereal years. With all of that said, all we have here at present is simply an evaluation of the alignment itself in terms of its periodicity. The next step is to actually look at the solar system, at all of the dates in our past history when this particular alignment occurred, and herein one may also go forwards in time, seeking out future instances of the conjunction pattern. This gives us the following. Here you can see all of the subintervals given in blue in the column on the left, with all of the years when the conjunction pattern actually occurred noted on the right. The date ranges are from 10,964 BC through to 5842 AD. With this table completed then, all we now need to do is compare the dates given here with those of the various global disasters or extreme environmental changes as detailed previously. This gives the following. On the left we have the precise dates of the alignment as modelled from astronomical software, in this case Starry Night Pro 6, specifying the exact times when the alignment achieved its optimum pattern. To the right we have the best dates as scientifically determined or estimated for the extreme global events as previously listed. Here one can see then that of the past 12 instances wherein this configuration has manifested in the heavens, on 8 of those occasions the Earth has suffered extreme upheaval in one way or another. The close matches are given in orange, with the differences in terms of years in red. Now one can see how accurate the matches are, on the order of either just a few years or just a few decades. On account of the correspondence then, it is thus suggested that the conjunction pattern in question was indeed somehow an active trigger for the noted disaster events, even though, qualitatively speaking, they do not appear to be of the same type. Indeed, one does have to wonder just how exactly a conjunction pattern could trigger such a wide variety of different effects. The answer is to be had from a careful examination of some of the most exotic phenomena associated with comets, as observed in the modern era, and this will form the basis of the next presentation in this series. Now that concludes this first presentation. In the next one, I'm going to go on to look at comets in particular and also look at the work of Immanuel Velikovsky and this idea of catastrophism. And I'm going to show you just how the conjunction pattern that I've just detailed, including others, can actually trigger a whole host of exotic effects within the solar system. All of the things from cometary bombardments, strange changes in the colour of the sun, etc. All of these things can be triggered by conjunction patterns, and I'm going to show this in the next presentation. For now though, I would urge you, if you're interested in my work, to visit my website and also have a look at purchasing a copy of my book, and that will really help out. For now though, we conclude this presentation.